We have Sabine Mensah. She's the regional lead for Central and West Africa. Hi, Sabine. We have Jaspreet Singh, Inclusive Innovation Lead. Thanks for joining us. And we also have Ali Akram, who's a technical specialist in Nepal, and his connection is unfortunately not allowing him to go on video. But Ali, thank you for joining us via phone. We're very excited to have such a full house here today, bringing really the expertise from all across UNCDF to this webinar. Thank you for joining us. And Sabine, why don't you kick us off with just a quick introduction to what UNCDF actually is and what your focus areas are.
Hello, can you hear me? Just wanted to make sure because my...
Loud and clear, please go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. I wanted to start, for those who don't know us, that we are indeed a UN agency focused mainly on local development, inclusive finance, and least development countries investment platform. And today we are really focused on the inclusive finance and digital. And then I wanted to share with you a little bit my perspective in terms of inclusivity and why for us this is important as we venture into the digital strategy. So first of all, inclusion in the digital area, it actually isn't a given because technology can be neutral. It's the application of technology that can be inclusive or exclusive depending on how it is. For us at the UNCDF, our focus is really to work on digital transformation and making sure that we are not leaving anyone behind. And for us, it means promoting inclusive digital economies. It means really working with people to make sure that they have access and they also have the capacity to be able to use innovative digital services in their daily lives. And that these services at the end of the day will empower them to meet their own development goals and to help us contribute to achieve the sustainable development goals as we move forward towards the 2030 agenda. As far as UNCDF is concerned, we are focused on LDCs, and a inclusive digital economy program has been running in 28 developing countries. And through our intervention for the past couple of years, we have been able to contribute, I would say, working with our different partners to bring 18 million new clients to the digital ecosystem. So we're very proud, and we are continuing to work into this digital strategy and onboarding as many people as possible. This strategy is focused on 4 key work streams, mainly starting with the client, of course. How do we make sure that clients have information and capacities? So we invest in a lot of financial education, digital education, and making sure that clients have the information. And also, it's also driven by client centricity and making sure that providers are starting with the client first towards the solutions. The second work stream is the enabling universal access to the digital payment ecosystem. And here for us, that ecosystem can be as wide as the GSM ecosystem, the electric grid ecosystem, to the identity ecosystem for people to have identity and be able to have access to electronic accounts, and of course, obviously, incentives behind it. The third work stream is inclusive innovation. And oftentimes they ask us, why inclusive? Because we believe that the solution starts with the client and then builds that innovation to foster adoption. And then the last work stream is policy and regulation, and how we work together with the different stakeholders to enable, to foster, enabling regulatory environment that incubate innovation. So this is overall what we are striving towards in terms of vision and strategy to promote this digital economy that leaves no one behind. So I'm going to pass on to Ali to give you an example of how we've leveraged these innovations and these digital strategies to respond to the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone, in Liberia and Guinea as well. Ali, to you.
Thank you, Sabine, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a pleasure talking to you. Unfortunately, I can't get my video to work, but it's a pleasure talking to all of you. So I'll very quickly share with you some of the work that UNCDF did and how successfully leveraged digital and innovation technologies during the Ebola crisis, which is very relevant also in terms of the situation we find ourselves in today because of COVID, where social distancing, limited mobility, and the urgency to make payments digitally was also equally relevant then. So As we all know, early 2014, the Ebola outbreak happened in West Africa, particularly affecting three countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. And in October, the United Nations Mission for Emergency Ebola Relief, or UNMIR, identified as payments as a critical function that needed to be prioritized and coordinated through the UN response. So UNCDF lent its technical abilities and support to that program, where innovations in digital payments were used very successfully across the three countries in very quick time. In October, the decision was taken to digitize and for UN to support the national governments, make payments to over 50,000 response workers, which included contact tracers, case handlers, and burial teams. And their salaries, hazard payments, and incentives was decided to be coordinated through UNMIR. And UNCDF, through its technical experts and presence in country, was able to make these 50,000 payments digitized from the next month onwards. So by November, we were on the road to digitizing and using formal financial mechanisms to pay all of the response workers in an efficient and transparent manner. UNCDF support for the project, or program rather, extended towards multiple activities, which included the overall program coordination, making sure that the payments are coordinated at the national level, and regionally we are sharing best practices through the task team set up in Accra. Then the country teams worked with the national response units and task forces and government ministries, helping them clean databases, register beneficiaries, creating those lists, having an electronic database available to weed out any leakages and make sure that the whole process is managed transparently. We also were able to support governments engage with the private sector players and onboard payment service providers, including banks and the likes of mobile and digital financial service providers, including Airtel, Splash Money, and third-party providers. And within a month, we had payments going out to all of the beneficiaries because of the digital channels that we were able to identify, leverage, and plan towards with. One of the great big learnings working across the three countries and managing such a large program was understanding that each country presented different dynamics and realities on ground, including the infrastructure. And the modalities that we adopted across all three countries were tailored to the situations on ground. Sadly, Ebola was not the last emergency where UNCDF stepped up and lent its expertise. A similar project, which I will invite my colleague Digitising to present to you all, is the work that UNCDF did in Nepal in the aftermath of the earthquake that came around, and how UNCDF was able to leverage its technical expertise and map out the infrastructure and help the response in the country. Jaspreet, over to you.
Right, thanks Ali for that segue on the challenges that any crisis that we face in crisis, right? And information becomes key in terms of your own ability to take decisions, and critical decision in terms of that what is the level of readiness or infrastructure readiness on the ground, where the digital payments can be made successful in terms of delivery and to the last mile especially. I think Nepal, being such a diverse country with challenging environments ranging from plains to mountains and to hills, kind of when the earthquake struck in Nepal in 2014, this was the precise issue that the government of Nepal, when they wanted to provide the recovery funds to the people at the last mile affected by the earthquake, they were completely saddled by one fact that they didn't have any clue of where the infrastructure is and to what degree is that infrastructure actually active to deliver cash or even payments at the last mile. And that basically started a whole lot of series of engagement, which allowed us first to work on a physical map where we had to put a GIS coordinates of each and every infrastructure in the country, working with the service providers, in order to respond to the earthquake. But then obviously that led to a more broader visioning by the government, where they ended up working with UNCDF and setting up an infrastructure or a portal where the data on the infrastructure in the country is captured on a regular basis. And basically that allowed for two things to happen. One is it immediately opened the doors for better policy making, especially because with that insights around the infrastructure landscape and how things stand in terms of last mile delivery channel, the government or the central bank in Nepal was able to broadly define the incentives and the parameters around which they will need to work in order to further augment in the market the creation of new channels, which basically allowed for new policies to be rolled out. And then the mountains or the hill geographies which were completely off limit in terms of infrastructure, or where there was no infrastructure at all, now as we speak, standing in 2020, almost there is no village in Nepal which does not have a financial institution point, compared to when we started this in 2014-15. So I think that's one big outlook in terms of how governments can use data to unlock or drive policy making for more long-term impact. At the same time, the same portal was used by the private sectors to understand or know that to what extent do they need to invest into a certain geographies, how they should be investing into it, what are the issues around their own performance in terms of transactions and things like that, which would allow them to make better decisions at institutional level. But beyond just the financial infrastructure and how this portal allowed the policy makers to make a decision, we also saw how important this was for some of the other non-financial decision making at the level of the government, because financial infrastructure at the last mile or the transactions happening in a certain geography was a good surrogate in terms of how the education system could be built into a certain geography, or how the health infrastructure needs to be beefed up. So we have seen that how World Bank aligned on using this portal and the data, draw from the data from this portal to work on a broader project around health infrastructure and education, and kind of helping government of Nepal in making decision in terms of how they should be basically rolling things out. So in nutshell, the data or this kind of system obviously kind of lays out a big is a big help in terms of planning ahead of time. But obviously all that planning will only kind of work for the purpose if we take the customer outlook in perspective, and that we kind of start looking at what are the customer needs on the ground, and then work backwards in terms of how we can shape our policies to meet up to those needs. And I think with that contest, I'd like to really bring someone on board, Sabine, who will be able to share with us from her experience on working with refugees in Western Africa, and how basically the customer centricity was a key dimension and aspect of our delivery of services onto them. Sabine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jaspreet. Yeah, it is right. We often hear a lot from our partners, providers, different stakeholders that maybe the clients that we are targeting, the most vulnerable ones in the rural area, the unbanked, maybe they don't have the capacity to use these digital payment, digital financial services. Maybe we need to find other ways to reach out to clients. And to all of these, I say at the core of the issue, the question is about knowing the target client segment that you want to provide a solution for. For us at UNCDF, the equation starts with the client. It's really centered in leveraging human-centric design principle, really doing a clear segmentation within a niche of customers that we are trying to serve to better understand, what is the value proposition that fits the client, what are the channels most appropriate to provide and reach the client and provide the information, and what are what ways are clients using or leveraging to learn? Where do they get their information? How are they influencing the decisions that they're making? And all of that come into building your solution at the end of the day. And I wanted to share with you a couple of examples where we've partnered with other agencies in the UN system to provide services in digitizing payments at the last mile. And it was interesting to see how the perspectives are different. The first example I will start with is the one that's just related to where we work with the UNHCR in Zambia. And this was the refugee case in the Meheba camp. The core issue there was that the identity documents that the refugees had were the refugee ID. The regulation for mobile money in Zambia at the time did not recognize the refugee ID as an identity for KYC, know your customer information, to be able to leverage that to open a digital account. So working with the different stakeholder and the Bank of Zambia, able to really bring a change, whereas the refugee ID was an accepted identification for KYC, and that triggered the opportunity to provide mobile money services in the Meheba camp, and bringing also the providers in Zambia to set up agent networks within the camp close by and enable the inclusion of refugees through digital payments. That's one example. The second one is partnership with the government of Senegal for a feasibility study in the digitization of pension payments in Senegal, leveraging mobile money or digital payments. Interestingly, when we went into the project, we got also similar questions about, well, maybe they might be, given the age factor, given the fact that a lot of the pensioners are back now into rural areas and far away from the major centers, are we really able to serve them well? And again, here we did a human-centric design with the pensioner. We did an immersion with in the life of the pensioners, actually spending a day with them in their homes and really understanding their everyday life and what they're doing. And throughout that human-centric design and also a quantitative study we've done with about 2,000 pensioners, we find out, surprise, surprise, that identity was not an issue here. 99% of them had an identity document suitable for digital payment. 89% already had phones, mobile phone. 49% were familiar with electronic payment and willing to move and switch to mobile money receipt of their pension benefits. So that's again another example where some of the assumptions we have for clients' capacity to adapt to digital payment and adopt these digital payments were not exactly what we started with. And then it really brings up again the issue of being sure that we understand the client and we integrate a research that showcase that for these clients, here are the opportunities, digitization, and then finally delivering on that promise. And the last example that I will bring up is that it is an example where we've collaborated with WFP, but also UNHCR and other agencies in really leveraging digital financial education, digital literacy systems, and also training, leveraging a mobile application, a tablet, or cartoons, or training, because we feel like as much as we can find a digital solution for customers, for the most vulnerable one, we want to make sure that they are trained, they understand the solutions that are provided to them, they have the capacity to do it, and they can access this training on demand on a device that they have in their hand, a mobile phone potentially, or a tablet for train-the-trainer systems, or cartoons, leveraging community radios and things like that. So I thought it was interesting to bring this perspective, and also to bring it back to, let's say, technology and Silicon Valley type of solution. And whereas for the most vulnerable customers, there's a great opportunity to use technology to find the right solution for the customer. And when we do have that value proposition, that compelling value proposition, believe it or not, the adoption comes much, much faster. So I'd like to turn on to Ali to share with you how this type of innovative solution can be tailored to vulnerable customers. Ali, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sabine. And yeah, you've really given a great platform for my talk about Alloy, which is a partner implementing 2 projects here in Nepal. And it's a very good example of how big data can be used as a powerful tool for supporting vulnerable segments, providing them vital services and goods in the case of Alloy. So UNCDF's partner Alloy is leading the use of tokens and big data in Nepal to build a green economy. They've got 2 pilots ongoing right now where they use technology-driven system which leverages data also, but initially provides closed loop to tokens to beneficiaries, and these tokens are transmitted through SMSs, and the beneficiaries can then redeem these tokens at the pre-vetted and authorized outlets or service providers as per the requirement. So having a closed loop system also provides this great big benefit of bringing in transparency and ensuring that the benefits being provided to the beneficiaries are used for the purpose and objective they were meant and designed for. The 2 projects that Alloy is implementing, one, Regrow, targets the agriculture sector, where it provides microloans to smallholder farmers, farming inputs to smallholder farmers, including seeds and fertilizer. So farmers are provided tokens that they can go and redeem at the nearest input supplier that is participating in the scheme. And in exchange for tokens, the smallholder farmer receives the inputs, seeds and fertilizers in this case, and also extension service trainings. So receiving those, the tokens are then transferred onto the input supplier or the service provider, and these are then redeemed in cash by the merchant through the participating bank or financial service provider. Similarly, Alloy's Bijuli Power transportation solution looks at combating climate change and air pollution and facilitates inputs to women 3-wheeler taxi drivers here in Nepal. So they're called tempos over here. So women tempo drivers can receive tokens and they can go avail cheaper subsidized fuels and automotive inputs, lubricants that they might require through the intervention that they're adopting over here. And this is just to show how data builds that platform to be able to provide additional services to these micro entrepreneurs. Alloy's platform allows for credit scores to be calculated, and in future for micro loans and investments also to be provided to these micro entrepreneurs. Similarly, the platform can also service as a channel for marketing and information if these micro entrepreneurs were to provide it with some trainings or communication information can be transmitted also over this platform. So there are multiple ways how segments are now being serviced through innovative and technology-driven solutions, which UNCDF is also supporting implementation of here in Nepal. Sabine, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ali. I think for us, we wanted to bring it back again into payment during crisis and beyond. And right now, there is a crisis that we have all experienced close and are still experiences the COVID-19. And we at UNCDF on the digital front have really looked at what we could do immediately with digital solutions to help our partners, to help customers, to help SMEs, vulnerable population to cope with the actual crisis, and hopefully also build a resilience towards solutions that are durable and contribute to their resilience. And some of the examples wanted to share with you here is how with the confinement measures, we have supported a transportation company, a boda company, so which is motor taxis in Uganda, transform themselves into an e-commerce platform with food and goods delivery systems. So enabling SMEs, entrepreneurs in the market to still be able to sell the goods and have those delivered home so people are in confinement. Another example is how we've also initiated a call for proposal to work with digital solutions for MSMEs resilience in West Africa, in Senegal, Benin, Ghana, and Togo. And this Togo in partnership with UNDP Togo. And this here we've really been able through this program to onboard about 7 different types of solutions, ranging from e-commerce platform for groceries, e-commerce platform for mom and pop shop, so general retail, to digital solutions for MSMEs, so a digital ledger on a phone application where they can log in their inventory, their stock, and also their sales and their payments. So through the use of the data from this application, we can enable additional funding from the financial sector, because we're able now to understand their working capital requirements, and through also solutions that are really looking at contact tracing and leveraging IVR, as well as messaging, digital messaging on WhatsApp to provide the right information on the disease, and help organization and also governments to get a real-time information on the pandemic. So those are just a few of the examples that I wanted to share with you. Please feel free to check on the UNCDF website and on the COVID-19 response. You would see a lot of the initiatives that we have done, and we welcome the opportunity to share with each one of you what we could do together as a UN system and those partnerships. I've named a few, there are a lot more of those out there that we have done, and we look forward to partnering with others into providing solutions that will contribute to the resilience of population as we navigate the crisis. So thank you very much. I think I am turning now back to the team for Q&A, I believe.
Yes, that's right. So we're turning back to me. Thank you so much to you and everyone for a really insightful presentation. I'd like to invite everyone to turn to the Q&A box to leave any questions that you have for our presenters there. But before we get there, I would actually like to pass on a compliment from Talita from UNICEF. I believe she's based in New York. And she's saying it's amazing that we have these capabilities in the UN communities. So congratulations to you and your team for fantastic work. Very inspiring. I have a bunch of questions coming in, and I wanted to start with one asked by an anonymous attendee. And the colleague is wondering, what are the key components that you need to be in place to digitize payments? What are the key steps that you need to take? I think it was alluded on, but maybe you could just share, can it be done anywhere? Are there specific conditions that need to be in place for it to be successful?
I think Jaspreet would probably have the beginning of the answer, and we can both, Ali and I, chip in. Jaspreet, you want to take
great.
this one?
Right,
And,
thank you.
And maybe, do you also want to come back on video, Jaspreet?
Sure,
Fantastic.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
take that up. I think, perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. Let me start with that. Okay, and there's obviously, a lot of things that are needed in terms of, from an infrastructure standpoint, in order to drive successful delivery of digital payments. But having said that, we should also be mindful that different markets are at different stages of their journey. So while, one can say or make an argument that digital ID is a key component of it, but, we can still go ahead and do KYC without digital ID being in place, right? So there are other ways of basically kind of, achieving the same objective and goals. I think it's a very much a country context. And I think the couple of things that are kind of important from a payment perspective is the aspect of identity and KYC, which is kind of key to it. Second is the last mile presence, and obviously how much is the last mile, and to what extent is it kind of really reaching the last mile becomes another debate to have. But that's the second key element to successful infrastructure build-up of delivering digital payments. And obviously the third is the readiness of the market itself, in terms of that the players, the supply side players, to what degree are they using different kind of infrastructure, right from your card to to, you know, mobile, to NFC, or to any other different form of digital instrument that could be deployed. And as I said earlier, you know, all of this kind of plays a role, considering that, you know, the telecom network will have an effect on it. There are markets, or there are areas in a certain geography where even there is no 2G coverage or no data coverage, right? So, you know, irrespective of how well we can equip the market in terms of a mobile infrastructure, digital payments will not really function that way. So we will have to resort to maybe a card and a biometric combination. So I think those are the kind of variables that kind of come into play when you think of all of this. And having said that, the most important part of this is the customer itself. To what degree is the customer really ready and, you know, can actually engage with the modality that you're offering? I think that should become the starting point for, you know, moving into any direction, that to what degree is the readiness of the customer to adopt these services. And rather than the technology is a lesser part of all of this equation, it's the customer which is a bigger part of the equation. Chip in, Sabine, Ali.
Absolutely. Yes, just wait. I was going to add the fact that it is key also to have the engagement of the different stakeholders, from the government to the supply side, and obviously to also the organizations that are going to contribute on the customer centricity part, and contribute also into the training piece of the equation as needed. So it does take an ecosystem to really make this work. And as much as we can get the engagement of all the different stakeholders and a coordination mechanism that brings all these stakeholders together, I mean, these would really help in breeding success in the implementation as we move forward. Another aspect to take into consideration, of course, is the regulatory environment enabling for the type of solutions that you want to put into place. And I have to say, I really have been amazed by how regulators have reacted with the COVID pandemic, and a lot of the regulators have taken measures to enable digital payment, to overcome the identity issue with KYC thresholds that are much lower today than they are in some countries, and, you know, no fees or very low fees for digital payments. So I've seen that movement, and I think that's an area that we can look forward to, a more enabling environment for digitization of payment, crisis or not, for that matter. So Ali, you want to add something?
Yeah, very quickly, I'll just make one small point in addition to what Jaspreet and Sabine just mentioned. That
Ali, sorry to interrupt. You're a bit quiet. If you could come a bit closer to the microphone, we'll be able to hear you better.
I hope it's better now.
Slightly better, yes. Go ahead.
Right. So the only point I'll make is that when we talk about digital payments, there are multiple instruments and multiple channels that are available, and designing a solution depends upon the situation on ground, for which UNCDF, having responded in multiple situations in countries, has devised scoping tools also, which help us understand what could work and what could not work from within the range of the different instruments and channels we know that can be leveraged over there. So yeah, I'll just make that point, which in response to how do we look at what solution can work where. Thanks, back to you.
Great, thank you so much. And I just want to say before we go to the next question that I'm really enjoying how you're constantly saying it's about the user, the technology needs to fit the user, that identifies or that determines whether it is a right solution will be adapted. I've really enjoyed this as part of your presentation, so thank you for bringing this in. And I would like to try and give the floor to Gladys, formerly IFAD, formerly FAO, now at IFAD, I believe in Rome. Gladys, if you are able to speak, would you like to ask your question yourself?
Thank you, Joanna. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm just curious to know, in the ideation and design phase of these projects, how much of the 9 digital principles is implemented or is integrated in the design and ideation phase? Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys.
Jasper?
Oh, it comes to me. No, so I think I think we kind of reflected on the principles in different ways during our conversation, or during the presentation as well. Right from understanding of the existing ecosystem to design with the users and what can be scaled. I think all the projects that UNCDF has been kind of working on, these are some of the core elements to or these are the foundational elements to how we like to think of the engagement. Okay, in terms of to what degree can that be scaled or it can be made viable from a market perspective, to what degree is it kind of really bringing in a change which is more market led and is sustainable in a long run. How much can it be reused and improved on? I think there is always those elements that are kind of quite critical to thinking through the design of the project or any program for that matter. And I'll just kind of have to agree to the fact that that's kind of the foundational elements which are core to the work that we are doing.
Thank you very much.
I hope that answers you, Gladys, but I'm more than happy to, if there's anything specific you would like to pick up on that.
Excellent. Sabine, did you want to add? Please go ahead.
No, I think,
oh,
yeah.
Okay,
no, because I saw a lot of questions on the Q&A that refer, go ahead, maybe I will tackle them. I think I'd seen somebody were asking if we're doing the project with both UNHCR and WFP when I mentioned the Zambia project. No, this was, in Zambia, it was UNHCR and UNCDF. And WFP, we have a lot of countries where we are partnering, including Senegal, Niger, Uganda, and I believe also in Tanzania. And with UNHCR, we are also in several countries. Beyond Zambia, we are also partnering in Uganda. We've done a joint study on refugees for DRC. We are currently looking at West Africa, potentially interventions together and finding the way that we can collaborate in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So, but those are still ongoing discussions and work with these two agencies that we've collaborated, I would say, very closely in the region.
Thank you very much. And that was a question from Paul from WFP. Thanks for taking it. I would now like to try and give the floor to David Thomas to ask his question. David, if you're able to speak, do you want to go ahead? If you're unable to speak, that's also fine, then I will ask the question for you. And David was wondering whether there are effective digital literacy resources available to support the projects. Is there any evidence of quick, broad digital literacy programs achieving impact at scale?
I think it's still an area where we need to dig in. We've certainly used digital channels for financial education, digital literacy. I think it's too soon to be able to talk about the long-term impact of it. We have seen it very helpful, especially when it is it's merged with finding a lead person within the community. So a resource person who becomes a trainer and leverage a tablet tool that has videos and cartoon in language within a community setting. So when we pair these two, it becomes, for us, we find it more effective in passing on the information. And when we stick around and we evaluate in terms of the retention of the information that's shared and the capacity to really understand when we do financial education, for instance, and the capacity to be able to use the phone to do a mobile money transaction, for instance. We find that when we do use digital tools, audio, visual, in language, with image, and with the resource person, the trainer, it seems to work better. So it's almost like, you know, you're trying to build a perfect storm of enablers to share that information within a community setting. But I would say it might be maybe too soon for us to talk about, you know, the long-term impact of or rigorous analysis or research on which medium works the best. I mean, colleagues, feel free to add as well.
Seems like you have covered it, Sabine. And I have just reposted an article that Karima, who's also from UNCDF and supporting this webinar, posted earlier in response to David's question with some further resources on a financial education toolkit, which you might find interesting.
Yes, and with the cartoon as well. I love it. Yes.
Ah, there we go, cartoons. That in double to the click rates that we're going to get. I would like to move on to an interesting question from an anonymous attendee. And the colleague is wondering how you address identity concerns, especially for beneficiaries in developing countries. And they're saying identity theft and fake IDs are often used to exploit payments. So how do you address this?
That's a great question. I think that question for me merged both identity and security of systems and customer protection, all three together. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think for us, as we are engaging into programs and projects, we are working with the different stakeholders, and we are also embedded in most countries with the government, the National Financial Inclusion Strategy or the digital strategy. And in the implementation of the project with the different private sector partners is really looking at what is accepted identification from a KYC perspective, and looking at the beneficiaries that we want to serve and whether those, if that is a barrier, and how we work with the government, with the community leaders to enable them to have access to identity when, you know, taking the question from a pure identities process. There are also areas where the government, the regulation can intervene in terms of tiered KYC, whereas you would be able to open a digital account without an identity, but you're limited in the type of transactions that you can do. I think with the different agencies, there's also been a lot of advocacy to enable vulnerable populations to have access to identity documents. So that's one side of the equation, I would say. In terms of customer protection versus the type of fraud where you have these identity theft and all, I think there's a lot that we all in the UN system and the different stakeholders can do. At the core for me, it's also including that into the education component of the programs that we are sharing. It's also really advocating with the different stakeholders for joint mass communication on customers prevention, I would say, in terms of understanding your rights, understanding what you need to do, understanding what a fraud scheme, you know, with identity theft can look like, as much of the preventing measures that we can take in communicating and reinforcing customer protection principle into the development of the programs, and also into educating the customers on the right. That's another piece of the equation. And the last piece is really from a provider standpoint on the supply side, and making sure that the systems that are being used, the platforms that are being used for digital payments are indeed secure. And that there's a lot of work done in research and constantly improving mechanism against cybercrime and securing the platforms that are servicing these customers. But I welcome Jaspreet and Ali, your thoughts on this question as well.
No, I think you well covered the entire dimension of looking at digital ID and, you know, from different perspectives.
Back to you, Joanna.
Okay, I was just wanting to see if Ali wanted to chip in, but seems like we've covered that.
No, it's good. Sabine covered it.
Excellent. Well done, Sabine. Very good answer, and a very different and a complicated question, I think.
Very much so.
Yes. Before I hand over to another colleague to ask their question, I briefly wanted to squeeze in a question around partnerships. And you mentioned that you're embedded and working very closely with the government. And a colleague is wondering what private sector partners you're working with to digitize your solutions.
Wow. Most of the time in most of the countries where we work, we partner with mobile money operators, banks, mobile financial service operators, microfinance institutions, fintechs, and startup ecosystem and incubators. So it's a large platform. But for West Africa, for instance, some of the regional players that we've worked with include MTN Mobile Money, Orange Mobile Money, Move Etisalat, as well as Airtel in some of the countries differently. And from a bank's perspective, again, I'm bringing it back to the regional for West Africa. We have worked with EcoBank, for instance, from a regional perspective. We have in each country's what we call a digital, it's a working group. Usually it's either working group for digital financial service working group or financial inclusion working group or inclusive finance and digital working group, depending. And in most of these working groups, you will find the key players from the digital ecosystem, ranging from a mobile to banks and MFIs. So, and again, the players are different from a region. I mean, just we can give you from the Asia perspective some of the partners that we've had, and Ali as well.
And I think I'll just kind of add to Sabine's point. See, from our traditional thought process in terms of how financial services used to be, where banks were the predominant players, delivering financial services. We live in a world, and when we talk of digital economy, it is no more the banks which are delivering the last mile use cases or the service that a client needs anymore. Okay, it is basically maybe a fintech, it can be a health tech, it can be edutech, or it can be a very different nature of, player which would be delivering end user focused service. Okay, and I think that's where, UNCDF right now is really is actually working on that. How do we, move beyond our thinking, beyond just financial services? And financial services, we understand, is a means to an end. It's not an end goal. I think that the way we kind of operate and work on the ground is looking at what is the end goal, and then which are the kind of players which can deliver on these end goals, and then what kind of partnerships that they require to enable in those delivery models. And I think that kind of goes to the fact that, how we have the broad spectrum that Sabine was mentioning of. And because we live in a platform economy, some of these players that at least we work in this part of the world on Asia includes the likes of Grab and some of the bigger players in the platform space, beyond your traditional, players who have been engaging in delivering of financial services for that matter.
And Jaspreet, I think one of our strengths has also been able to bring all of the incumbent with the new players and into partnerships that are win-win to serve our customers, to serve the most excluded, the most vulnerable ones, because it takes that partnership of leveraging, sadly, those who own the infrastructure with those who can innovate on top of the infrastructure, provided that the ecosystem is open and accessible. So we pride ourselves in being able to really incentivize these partnerships through those proof of pilots and innovation projects that we are driving.
I think that's possibly the beauty of being in UN. I think UN provides that neutral platform to actually enable that, which no one else actually is able to do. I think that kind of goes to the credit of how this entire institution is set up and what it can possibly do to achieve those outcomes in nutshell.
So ends my call to all the participants again. Please let us know how we can work together with you.
I just want to say I'm getting goosebumps listening to you. I love the call for partnerships, for collaboration, the focus on the user. I'm really very impressed, and I wish everyone in the UN was like you. We'd be such a better place. That being said, I would now like to hand over to our colleague Diana from UNDP in Panama, I believe, and she has got a lot of questions around blockchain. Diana, if you should be able to speak now. Oh, actually, sorry, wrong Diana. Diana Gutierrez.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because this discussion is so pertinent right now. And I have 3 questions. The first one is how can we use blockchain technologies to ensure there's transparency, especially because we are receiving a lot of money from governments and the private sector to deploy support to MSMEs. And that in the middle, when we use, in some cases, some local partners, either governmental partners or other types of partners, there's always the risk of corruption. And I'm seeing in the blockchain technology a huge potential to avoid corruption. That's the first question. The second one is, can we use cryptocurrencies, let's say some sort of social cryptocurrency, to avoid those complications related to the legal restrictions in some countries where, for instance, it's illegal to raise money from the crowd massively. That's the second one. And the third one is, how can we overcome the challenges associated to the scarcity of US dollars in certain economies with hyperinflation, such as Venezuela? And I know this is not the only case. It's close to me because I'm based in Panama, but I know that this could be the case of other countries in different regions. Thank you so much.
Oh, I think Jaspreet, this is yours.
All right, I'll take it one by one. So how can we use blockchain technologies to ensure transparency and traceability of money granted to MSMEs? I think the example that we saw in the presentation with Alloy in Nepal, where we're talking of, you know, reaching the micro entrepreneurs and the women in the space with loans and credit. That's actually a technology that's using distributed ledger as a backend in order to ensure the end use monitoring of the funds. And I think there are two sides to this entire thing now, right? That while it's a good technology to have and, you know, a good infrastructure to talk about, but then there's also certain limitation in terms of how much can you really scale up with it, okay? Because, and I can certainly demonstrate with the example from Nepal that while it's good in terms of, you know, what they're able to do in terms of numbers and impact and how they're kind of, you know, reaching the individuals, but the scalability still becomes a question because it works in a you know, closed loop environment. The scalability of it will depend on various factors in terms of the readiness of infrastructure within the country itself. So so I think we do have examples of, you know, how it could be put to test in the market and how it could basically validate this issue around non-transparency or, you know, siphoning of funds. But I just want to kind of, you know, highlight one more thing, that technology should not possibly be the starting point when we are thinking through all of this. It should be that, you know, to what exactly, I think you kind of alluded to the challenges that you are trying to address, especially with, you know, transparency and siphoning of funds, which or the corruption, let's put it that way. The role of technology really comes in and can come in different ways. Distributed ledger is just one way of doing that. And obviously, you know, the other part or factor to consider is the cost of implementation of such a technology. Okay, because you know, we end up kind of, you know, going around with that idea to be too good, but, you know, the exorbitant cost of really scaling it up and putting it to market at a scale can sometimes be a long-term constraint, you know, if those factors are not considered alongside. So I think that's what are my 2 cents on that particular aspect of MSME traceability, and we are more than happy to share the learnings that we have from our work, not only in Nepal, but from other markets as well.
I love to talk to you on a bilateral, definitely.
Sure. Can we use social cryptocurrencies to avoid complications and over-regulation to financial transactions? Some outcries. Okay. It's basically a tricky question in the way that, you know, are we basically validating that, you know, can we basically use cryptocurrencies as a UN system? Or possibly there's a different direction to go. But yes, as I said earlier, you know, the idea of social cryptocurrencies is a great one. You know, tokenization can be kind of, you know, put to market and to, you know, address some of the inefficiencies that we have at a market levels, be it in terms of mobilizing resources or, you know, identifying connectors in terms of, you know, where and how the goods are being sold, or, you know, how the data basically moves. So I think, so all in all, you know, cryptocurrencies can be a good way of addressing some of those challenges. Obviously, it has to be looked in from the dimension of what the law of the land says about it, you know, because people, at least the policy makers across markets have, and, you know, especially I will not say developed markets more or less, but to some extent, yes. But in the LDCs, you know, where some of these things are completely unknown, you know, this could become really be a big challenge, because the understanding of cryptocurrencies, you know, and there's this tendency of linking everything to the idea of Bitcoin, you know, where without understanding the, you know, basics around how tokenization really function and work. So I think that kind of puts both the policy makers in a tough position to, you know, look and respond and use all of these things. So idea is great. I would certainly say that, but it just requires a little more focus on building alongside a little education, and then with the right actors on the ground to really, put it to market in a way. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead, Jaspreet.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to add to you, to what you were saying, but go ahead and finish.
No, I was just moving to the third question, please, so you can.
No, I was going to say that the area of cryptocurrency is a very, very interesting area where there's still a lot to be learned. And then there are also the fact that a lot of our regulators have taken a position pro or con, depending on which area of the continent you are. So I think it's an area where there's a lot of learning that we have yet to still understand, and it's an area that we are certainly watching very carefully to see how the learnings from the different initiatives can shape, what we could do in the future. And as far as blockchain as well, here we're talking about transparency. We are also looking at how we leverage blockchain into building your for the informal sector, and coming back to MSMEs or any other informal entrepreneur that's out there. Is there a way for us to build your informal resume of skills that you've learned on the job, so that you can carry that with you and be able to demonstrate that you've had this experience and how this can contribute also for you to have access to better economic opportunities, and at the same time looking at also the application in land rights, application in agriculture. So a lot of our work is also thought leadership in understanding what's being piloted currently, what are these innovations, and what's the future, what does the future look like with this innovation, and how can we carve that inclusivity in terms of our customer base, and what can we pilot a proof of concept within that context of the LDCs and the countries that we're working on. So yeah, a lot of things too. I'm personally very excited about the innovations that are coming up in the market, and the how far we could go in better serving our customers, leveraging this technology within the confines of a regulatory environment that enables those.
Right. No, thank you, Sabine. And I think to the third question that you had, Deanne, on the scarcity of US dollars and, the Venezuela example, I would just say that, while I'm not a subject matter expert on the fact that, how the monetary systems could basically address that issue, but I will just say that technology certainly can play a big role, when we think of how currencies work and, how the monetary system really function and work, and while we're looking at one dominant currency, obviously US dollars in this case, and how it can basically, change the track of how things could basically work in a certain market context. But yeah, technology can, come in as an alternative, or looked as a way to, really be a bridge on all of those things. And I think that there's an element of a lot of political dimension to that question as well. So I'm kind of, I'll just kind of stop at that. But happy to have a conversation, yes.
Thank you very much. It's certainly a very interesting field, and then there were colleagues actually putting ideas for collaboration with UNCDF in there. Mark from UNV, for example, had ideas on how to collaborate. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I know that a lot of really fantastic knowledge has been shared, but I also know that you have further resources that you just wanted to point contacts to. So I think on the next slide, there's an overview of, I'll let you talk to it, it's your slide.
Yes, I can. I just with this one question I saw into the Q&A, if you enable me to take it. Yes, we're very much using e-commerce platform in agriculture. One of the solutions that we're supporting in Togo is exactly that. It's an e-commerce platform for agro businesses and also producers. It gives you the stock of commodities and where they are. It enables you to order it, and it gets delivered to you via this electronic platform. So happy to share more. Please ping me or email me. I'm sure we can share our emails and we can discuss those. On this platform,
there was a question from Marie, by the way, from UNDP in Burundi, and I'm happy to.
Yay! It's interesting enough, Marie, this project is in collaboration with the accelerator lab of UNDP in Togo. We're doing it together.
Okay.
So you wanted to talk about the, Karima, were you going to talk about this, or is it me? those are documents that range from your responsible payment guidelines to how to digitize government to people payments, and also case studies into the refugee project in Zambia, as well as the financial inclusion portals, the RegTech solutions that we are creating, as well as the I think the feasibility study on pension payment, digitization of pension payment that I've mentioned, our experience for the last 5 years in Western Southern Africa with digitizing mobile money for the poor. So those are all resources available. Our website also has plenty of resources on the COVID response. So we welcome, you can check the website, but by all means, please do contact us by email, and we'll be happy to share all information needed.
Fantastic. And because a lot of colleagues have already asked about your email address, if you wouldn't mind popping them in the chat.
Yes.
There's a broader one there as well. I don't know if anyone wanted to talk to the previous slide. If not, we will definitely make it available on the slides that we'll be sharing. You can access them on our website very shortly. There will be a recording of this webinar, and we'll also be sharing the contact details of our presenters. Passing over to my UNCDF colleagues to see if there were any final comments.
Jaspreet, I'm going to leave it up to you. I just want to echo my thanks to you for organizing this session and enabling us to join the group of innovation at the UN. I am looking forward to other opportunities to engage with the different colleagues, and I want to thank you for your time, understanding, and also please, I am very much in favor of partnership, because I think together we go much farther and faster than if we were doing it by ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine.
Right.
And I think a really big thank you from our side to you guys for making the time, for joining us today, for sharing your expertise with us. Also a big shout out again to Karima and to David, who helped set up the session. It's been excellent bringing this expertise in. I'm always very humbled to see how much expertise we have available within the UN system. People always say, no, it's all in the private sector, but I actually think there's a lot within the UN. So thank you very much for reminding us of that and sharing it with us. The call for partnerships and putting the user first is very much heard, and I hope we'll be seeing much more from you, potentially in collaboration with other UN entities. So a big thank you, and thanks for everyone joining. Wishing you a good day, and see you in one of our future sessions.